You've eaten Gotham's wealth, its spirit, but your feast is nearly over.
This isn't a blood hole. It's an operating table. And I'm the surgeon. Why aren't you laughing?
From this moment on, none of you are safe.
Welcome to the Batman Book Club, a podcast exploring the Dark Knight Library. I'm your host, Ryan Lauer. The Batman Book Club is a proud member of the Batman Podcast Network, hosted by Batman on Film. Just go to batmanonfilm.com, click on podcasts, and you'll find the Batman Podcast Network that has a whole list of other Bat-related shows that like to dive into other nerdy subjects that all of us, especially Peter Rivera, love to frolic about in our free time. Batman Book Club is also on Patreon, so if you like what's going on with the show and you want to help support the show and keep the generators running in the Wayne Manor study, just go to patreon.com/thebatmanbc. Now, thank you for listening to episode 231, The Hush Saga. Oh yeah, we're going to get into what that means here in just a second, but I am not alone. It would be really boring if I was alone. So I called in one of the big guns. He's part of the organization sweeping the nation of the Ryan Meetup that is all full of Ryans. It's one Sir Ryan Haas. Hello, Ryan Haas.
Hello, I'm glad to be here, to be the other Ryan on this episode and my triumphant return to this podcast.
Yes, and I think if everything goes correctly, people are going to be familiar with Ryan and Ryan. Again in a couple months, crossing fingers.
Yeah,
because
like
it's
Dumb
a
and
big year
Dumber
for Batman year. Yes, Dumb and Dumber. Uh-oh, which one am I? Yeah, this is something we've been working on for a while. I want to, in anticipation of Hush 2, which will be coming out when this episode drops in just a couple days. You and I have read the first issue.
H2ush.
Yes, H2ush. H2ush. It's almost a Hawk-tuash.
Oh.
God, sorry about that. You and I have read the first issue. Obviously, comics people are very excited for it. It's come out over 400,000 already pre-ordered or something crazy like that.
That's huge for modern comics.
Probably gonna have 4 or 5 printings, all that goodness. And way back in episode 33 with good old Chris Balga, I talked Hush, the original. And then just back in November, which I should have looked back with old Dominic, we talked Heart of Hush. That was episode 217, talked Heart of Hush. Well, there's more than just 2 stories of Hush. And I didn't really want to go through, let's do so many episodes and really dive into every single thing that Hush has ever been in. But there is a timeline, of important
the saga,
Hush.
if you will.
Yes. Yeah. And DC did a great job of releasing that omnibus. That's the Hush Saga. And so because I'd read all of those, I think I've read like just about everything Hush has appeared in before. I told you, I have an idea that we can kind of go through the saga, talk about Hush as a character from, basically his inception until where he stays or is now. And
so essentially, this could end up being like a Hush primer almost.
Yes, there you go.
You want to like get a good overview without being maybe too spoiled. It could be.
Yeah, the Hush primer. But if you haven't, I just say, just like a few months ago, if you hadn't read Heart of Hush yet, I think you need to read Heart of Hush. I do not want to be one that tells you what happens in Heart of Hush. I would much rather you read it and experience it for yourself. That's the warning now. All the others, I'm just kind of like, I think it's completely fine. But you and I are going to talk about what happens in Heart of Hush and the ramifications of that going forward. Yeah. So if you hadn't read that yet, I do recommend that you go and read that really quick, because it's a pretty quick read. Pretty quick weed. Who am I? Elmer Fudd all of a sudden?
Elmer Fudd.
And yeah, otherwise everything else, Haas, I'm ready to talk some Hush. You ready to dig into Hush?
Yeah.
All right,
talk Hush.
Hush, hush, I thought I heard you calling my name. Now hush, hush, you broke my heart and knocked me down. Now hush, hush, I thought I heard you call my name. Now hush, hush.
So obviously the character slash villain's inception creation debut was back in the original story Hush, that was in
Yes.
Batman issues 608 through 619, which is 2002 and
Yeah.
2003, written by Jeff Loeb with art by Jim Lee. You're listening to this, you already know all about this. Tommy Elliott, and then the back
Correct.
of the Hush villain's head appeared and debuted in Batman number 609. Don't need
Mm.
to break down the beats of this story. Big mystery, 12 issues, a massive hit, has since become like a classic story with a villain that
Cornerstone
people
of
are
modern
aware of.
comics. Yeah.
Yes, I think, and
It's like
even
what I like to tell people, like what Batman 89 did for movie blockbusters,
mm,
Hush did for like modern comic storytelling.
mm.
That's kind of my analogy.
I think it was Bleeding Cool. There was, man, was it a few weeks ago? Yeah, probably some kind of comic thing last month. But Loeb was there, and he'd mentioned
Hmm.
also that he would, at conventions and everything, and he'd say that people like in comic shops, running comic shops, they always hand non like hardcore comic book readers that are interested of like what's some good like Batman stuff that's not overwhelming,
Oh
and
yeah.
many would tell
Hush.
him, I give them the Long Halloween and I give them Hush. Uh,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
I think that's totally fair and valid. I don't think there's a lot of work you need to do for either of those stories. And I kind of equated Hush to being um it's like a summer popcorn Batman
It's
story.
like the greatest hits kind of
Yeah,
vibe,
there's
but
tons
there's still
of
substance there, and I think people, I think
exactly.
the comic sweaties kind of forget that.
Yeah. And it's a obviously it's a showcase for Jim Lee, obviously. But then Jeff Loeb, I think, is up there as one of the greatest Batman writers of all time. And the story, I think and it's not a slam to call it like when I say like a summer popcorn comic book story, because those are the ones that like it's really fun. It's fun to look at. There has to be substance if you keep going back to it. I have some
Sure.
nitpicks about the story for sure, but overall, it's like
Yeah.
it is one of the more fun Batman stories, and
Yeah. Accessible.
it's very accessible, and it introduced a villain that, like it or not, I think he has cemented himself as like he's somebody that Batman fans know who he is. They know who Hush is, they know his alter ego, they know the relationship with Bruce Wayne, the personal relationship. So that couldn't happen if this first story wasn't the hit that it was.
Hmm. Yeah, it's a launch pad for that character and like the whole Batman universe. I mean, it's like it's the good version of it's like the best version of like event storytelling
Hmm.
without like
In Gotham and
needing
strictly
to
around
re
Batman, which is like,
strictly in
yes, that's what
Batman.
I
It was
want.
one title. You don't have to jump around and buy like every issue, every story to like
Yeah,
buy into it. It just felt like, and that's what got me and many others into weekly comic buying and
hmm,
weekly comic reading. It just felt like this is like the cornerstone best the genre has to offer. And it's a hard thing to do to have that
yeah,
kind of like storytelling capture that market share or whatever like every month. But back in the day when that story came out, like you felt it, I felt it as a kid. Like it what you could read every issue and one at a time talk about the story. It felt like water cooler, discussion. I felt that again once we were into the Grant Morrison run, and that felt very similar until it didn't.
yeah,
And at first in Grant Morrison's run, it was like, ooh, like one issue a month. This is cool, like good writer, good artist, and then it went a thousand different directions with a thousand different
yep,
mini series and stories and sprawling and stuff, which is for some people and it's its own wacky way of storytelling, but like the ethos of like superstar writer, superstar artist, like and DC has tried to replicate that many times to
yeah,
varying degrees of success. We've had like the all-star line and like even right now, like um the absolute line of comic. They're trying to do that same
yeah.
thing again. Or Black Label books are another good example of that. And then Hush
Yeah.
too. Um,
Yep.
so yeah.
So this, I, I'm ready to to move on because I just feel like that's definitely a topic that, or the first story is the one that we have to talk about the least.
Right, because
So
everybody know is like
yeah,
you've
you know
got
what it is.
Hush, Dark Knight Returns, Year One, Long Halloween, like those are all in like the top, five,
Yeah,
like Court of Owl's most talked about cornerstone Batman. Like when you get into Batman, you're gonna get
absolutely.
hit with those.
When it wrapped toward the end of 2003, um, I didn't put the year in, but there's a Hush return story that came out just
Yes.
a few years later.
Hmm.
Maybe 2000, I don't think 2004, 2005, 2006. 2006. Six is good.
Six, yeah,
Six is
six
good.
is good. Yeah.
The writer, so this is what's kind of nuts. It's in the Batman Gotham Knights title.
Hmm.
So not even one of the main ones. Issues
Hmm.
50 to 55, 60
50.
to 50 to 55, 60 to 71, number 73, and number 74.
Hmm.
Writer, fortunately, one writer amongst all those issues, AJ Lieberman. Artists, Al Barrionuevo, Javier Pina,
Barry, yeah, that
Rick
sounds good.
Burchett, and Diego Olmos.
Hmm.
This, I was very late to the game on this one. I knew Liebermeo did some covers
Mm,
for this one, so this was a
yeah,
young, early DC Batman Liebermeo. And I know he did
yeah.
some, but this was a son of a bitch to track down. Like DC Universe,
No,
it
they have it
I,
in a they do have it in a
there's a
paperback
trade
or
that's
trade, yeah.
50 to 55, and that's it.
Oh, it's just the core story. Yeah, yeah. Hmm. And
Yeah,
then
just
they
those
did more
first
later.
six issues, and then the rest wasn't collected in anything except for this Hush Saga
Mm,
omnibus. So I've
okay.
never read it until just maybe 2 months ago.
Okay.
And Haas, I can't tell you what the hell happened in that story. I do not remember
I
Hush
think
Returns, and I think that's
I
why
think
nobody talks
yeah,
about
and
it.
I think well yeah, and I think a lot of people agree with that. Like if you search for that story, it's pretty I was surprised, not necessarily surprised, but I was like, "Oh, what's the read on this story?" Because
Yeah,
I read it when it came out, and but I haven't. It doesn't get brought up much,
yeah,
even amongst Batman fans, because it's almost kind of like I don't want. It's kind of like a fluke. It's kind of like a, oh yeah, that happened kind of
yeah.
thing. That the ill-fated follow-up. Gotham Knights as a series. Do you remember reading Gotham Knights as a series when it
I've
was
read
first out?
no, not when it was first out because I was still that was still small town living in high school,
Mm.
and
Mm-hmm.
there were no comics. There was no availability. The only access that I had was driving 15 minutes into like a very small city that
Mm-hmm.
sold the trade collections. So like even with, and I've said this
Mm.
before here, so Hush was first released in two hardcover comics of like
Mm-hmm.
issues 1 through 5 and then 6 through 12. And I
Mm-hmm.
bought 6 through 12 and read that first.
Mm.
So I was
Mm-hmm.
spoiled of Hush's identity and I didn't even read the front half of the story. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so Gotham Knights, I had nothing. I had no idea until
Mm.
much later on, but then I read a good chunk and I think that they're fine.
Yeah.
The all the covers to start off were Brian Bolland.
Brian Bolland, and then I remember. I think did the Bermejo cover start with Heart of or start with Hush Returns?
Return of Hush, yeah.
Yeah.
See, the
Okay.
cover says the Return of Hush, but then the story is, called
Gets
Hush Returns and whatever.
later named Hush
Yeah,
Returns, perhaps. Kind
exactly.
of. Yeah.
But I'm
Uh-huh.
pretty sure, yeah, that was um, his first cover was for that issue number 50. But
Yeah. So that's what I remember the most about it. Like just reading some opinions online. It's like, oh, like it's unforgettable. That Hush run is unforgettable. It helped, or it's forgettable. I
forgettable.
can say, and
Yeah.
it helped run Hush into the ground. Like it just kind of like whatever. I think the when they make these other Batman titles, they try to have like a certain like ethos or a certain like main drawing point, right? Like
Hmm.
Legends of the Dark Knight was like its own weird like Legends of the Dark Knight. Like they could have like different creative teams come in and
Yeah.
tell 2 to 6 issue stories or whatever. I think Gotham Knights was kind of positioned as a, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was positioned like as a Batman family book or like this
Yes.
is like what's happening in the wider Gotham. Yeah,
Because they just
like at
reprinted
first.
two volumes of it
Okay. Yeah,
semi
yeah, 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 yeah.
recently, and I
Yeah,
have
that's right.
those, but then I think they just stopped. I forget what those
Maybe
were.
because they'll do that, like if they don't sell, like they won't finish the
Yeah,
runs or
this
whatever.
is Batman,
Um,
Gotham Knights Transference, and then uh Gotham Knights Contested, and then
okay, yeah.
they didn't
Well,
release any
part
other.
of it, and then part of that reason might also be because of what I'm about to say is that like many other series, like I think like Batman Chronicles and some other series can kind of
Hmm.
fall victim to this, is that like the longer it goes on, the more they just use it as a space filler for crossovers. Like
Yeah,
apparent, like I guess, like I'm reading here, like over its run, Gotham Knights participated in 6 different crossovers. So that
yeah,
might be another reason why there's not many collected things, because if you
that's
do collect
true.
them, it'd be like here's like 2 issues of this crossover and 1 issue of that one or whatever. I
Yeah,
remember
good point.
buy I remember into I remember buying like falling out of it. Like I got a bunch of back issues, and then I remember towards the end, I bought into it because let's see, trying to look at the, yeah, like I remember getting issue number 30 because it was part of Bruce Wayne Fugitive, and you
Um,
got as bats on the cover, you know, and I'm just like, ooh. Um, and then there's like some cool Bane stuff. I want to think maybe I think maybe issue number yeah, we're not talking about, yeah, if you we're not talking
this is
about
crucial to the
Hush
Hush
Returns,
saga,
but
okay?
we're not talking about Hush Returns because then maybe that says all we need to say about it. But like,
Yeah,
I think issue number 32 of Batman Gotham Knights is a pretty popular one because I believe it's Devin Grayson's final issue, and it's like a one and done thing. And it kind of goes from, it's not a cool cover. It's got like the grandfather clock in the middle and Batman on one
oh
side and
yeah,
Bruce on the other
that's
side,
a
and
very memorable image.
it's a memorable cover. And I think it just kind of goes through like the typical day in the life of uh Bruce Wayne. Uh so it, like in a way, like it reminds me of another really good issue of like one of the few like good issues of Batman Confidential that
Yeah,
doesn't subscribe to its other, what it
yeah,
was designed for. It's like a one and done issue that's like got a great like Andy Kubert cover, and it's like a night and a typical night and bat. Like it was really good. Like, so all that's to say is like the series was in a bunch of these like different crossovers, um and then with, they're like, oh, what can we do with it? Oh, let's bring back Hush and do that. And then they did that for a few
which
issues, and then
not a bad
yeah.
idea. And
And then they had to like, but I remember following it month to month. Like then they had to take a break for like war
yeah,
games, and then and then all of a sudden, like then they come back and pick the Hush storyline back up, and yeah.
yeah, and I mean, and I stand corrected. The trade paperback also 50 to 55, and then issue 66.
'66.
Okay, okay. Which is, it's just, to me, it's just odd that that is the place, like that's the issue, because it ends, the
Hmm.
Hush Return story ends with, there's a feud between Hush and Joker. I don't know
Yes,
why they chose those two to have the feud, because from
because
the
they're like
original,
marquee characters, Hush and Joker.
yeah,
From
but
the
like
Go
it,
ahead.
it does some things that I'm kind of like, okay.
Yeah,
With
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
Joker almost being like he runs away in a sense because he's sad
Sure.
because he lost, and okay, whatever. And Joker places like a
Yeah,
basically almost like a, it's like a, not a pacemaker, but um it's almost like speed
yeah,
and
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Hush.
yeah,
If
yeah.
your heart rate drops below 55, you will blow up, sort of deal.
Yeah.
And
But
the
it's like it's trying to hit that thing of like, oh, Hush was a made Joker a pawn in his scheme before, and so now
I just
Joker's getting his revenge kind of thing.
and I just remember in reading it too, and I was trying to take my time, and I had no urge to go
Mm,
back to it to freshen up for our
yeah,
conversation because it is
sure.
just like it happened. So I skimmed the last issue, and it's kind of strange to me that like these issues aren't available or collected because they are referenced in Heart of Hush, in which I remember in reading
Mm-hmm.
Heart of Hush, and I was like, this didn't happen at the end of Hush. I don't understand what is he talking about. And then also
Right.
there's and we aren't going to talk about this at all, but there's a Man Bat mini 5 issue miniseries in 2006
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
I can't find anywhere. But apparently it
Mm.
does, like Hush pops in that, and they reference
These
basically
events.
the story that continued after Gotham Knights 74. Because
Mm.
you almost
Well, because
feel
this so Gotham Knight
shortchanged.
74 for context is like that Gotham Knight 74 is also the final issue of Batman Gotham
Yep.
Knights. And so it does I remember I was like, oh, you see the I remember getting that when it came out, oh, it all ends here. This is gonna be great. It's gonna wrap up everything, blah blah blah. And then it just kind of like doesn't. It just kind of it
Yep.
ends is weird
It's
and
an
it's
unsatisfying.
unsatisfying. Brian Brain.
Yep,
The
there you go,
same,
Ryan Brain.
yeah, the same
It's
word, unsatisfying.
because there is a way, and obviously we think of the top in Inception. It doesn't like
Yeah,
it cuts, and they're like, huh,
yeah.
leaves it open for discussion. This doesn't have that kind of
Hmm.
impact. It feels like you kind of cheated us here rather than allowing it to be
Yeah,
kind of fun of like, well, we get to decide what happens. And so in feeling that, I guess
yeah,
in this Man Bat series, Hush kind of references in that what followed this and how he was able to survive. Don't know, wasn't able
yeah,
to find it anywhere. Overall, I think Hush Returns is pretty I'm glad that I was very late to the game and reading it because I'd have been really disappointed, I
yeah,
think, if I'd have been following along and I'm like, oh yes, a Hush sequel. And this was what I got had to experience like month to month. I just think it's very forgettable. You already said it. Very forgettable story. I wouldn't tell anybody you have to go read this. If you want to do the work so that you can say, hey, I read it and I know, go for it.
yeah,
Don't have high
yeah.
expectations.
Don't have a high expectations. It's like like here's yeah, okay.
That's
So
always
like
the
my
best
movie
when someone's trying to. It's like
uh,
then there's just a sigh. It's like, all right,
if you
I
love
feel you.
comics, it's like you know how
I want to do the work.
when you want to do the work, yeah, as
Hmm.
Peter Arbera would say. You know how like when you're like I'm gonna watch all the Fast and Furious movies, but like
I've never
you
said
got to
that,
watch
but
the
okay, sure.
well, like you know, if you're Eric Holtzman and you're reading Hush for the first time,
That's right.
you know, it's like oh, if you want to watch them, you got to start with the first one, and then they did some weird stuff for like this couple sequels, and then really you can skip those and come back for like the fourth one, or maybe
Yeah.
even the fifth one's when it really kicks off. This is kind of like that, where it's like, oh, they brought him back, but it kind of was weird. I remember being really excited. I remember being really excited for it at the time because you look at that issue 50, it's like issue 50, like first new team, new direction, you know, the return of Hush. Look at that cover. And then I remember, I think there was even a preview in some of other Batman comics at the time that showed the first couple pages of of the first issue of this. And it was like, oh my gosh, this looks so exciting. Like, Hush is back. Look, the Riddler's like falling through like the glass and stuff and
Yeah.
all this stuff. And it just felt like, because like for me, like I wanted to, the way that the original Hush ends, like I want to see what's next for this character. Much in the way of like, everybody knows that anybody that knows me knows I'm a big Batman Nightfall and Bane fan. I'm like
What?
after we read Nightfall, it's like, oh, I
I
know.
never
It's like
knew.
what happens next for Azrael? What happens next for Bane? What happened? You know, they're kind of
Yeah.
Bane and Hush are similar in so much as that like they are were created specifically for to be for the villain of like a big event. But then the question happens of like, well, what do you do with this villain after the that of initial event is over? And they clearly didn't really. They just kind of meandered their way through it for either in Hush Returns, either and to me, just the way that you look at the comics, it's like it feels like they were probably hamstrung or let down by like the editorial nature of like being pulled in a few different directions and having to be parts of other crossovers and things like that.
Yeah.
Sadly, it's sometimes it just kind of like, some maybe they're just like it could have been like an editorial thing where it's like, oh, let's bring Hush back. That'll sell some issues versus
Yeah.
like more of a good faith thing of like, oh my gosh, let's
I've
get
got a
Flo
great
and Lee
idea
on
for
here and
Hush.
give them carte blanche and let them be like uninterrupted. Yeah, so yeah, read it if you're wanting to do the work, but it's
Yeah.
it's pretty skippable, sadly. Yeah.
I did plan out if we wanted to give like a letter grade for some of these, which I guess I didn't ask you
Hmm.
for Hush, but if you want, go ahead. Just the original story, letter grade. What
The
would you give
original
it?
story, yeah, I'm giving it an A. Like
Same.
it's the art's amazing and iconic. The writing is I think the writing's very good. You can read that and really get um good reads on Batman and Tommy Elliott and a lot of the other heroes and Bat family members and villains. It's just a great story.
Yeah.
It's you get a lot out of it, I think. And then bringing me back, like I've said many times, like, you know, I don't say that it's overrated, it's overexposed, but that's to me really neither here nor there. I just think it's essential Batman reading, you know.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm with you.
so
I'm
it's
with you
just
on
a good
that.
it's just a good story. Yeah.
I don't know if I graded it way back in episode 33, but I think for me I would,
Mm,
a couple of like nitpicks when it comes to story and whatnot, but as far as pure
there's
entertainment,
nitpicks for sure.
I'm like
Yeah.
probably for me probably like an A minus, I think
It's so
overall.
rereadable.
Yeah.
It's
Yep.
approachable. Yeah, you can
Yep.
always go back to it. Hmm.
Exactly. And then we get to Hush Returns.
Hmm.
What letter grade would you give that
D,
sucker? A
like a
D?
D.
Whoa! Ouch.
I
I'm
think
kidding.
D. Yeah, I think it's D because it's so forgettable,
Yeah.
and it's so when you try to read it, you can see the directions it was pulled in.
Mm.
Um, and it just kind of falls flat, and it doesn't like the art kind of goes all over the place. It feels like it starts with a like you read that first issue, I'm like, okay, yeah, even if I
Yeah.
it's kind of where's it
Riddler
gonna
falling through
going?
the
I don't
window
know.
and somebody crashing through is a very like, wait, what? And then it's like, let's go back a week or something like that. It's like, huh,
Yeah,
okay. And
yeah,
then Hush
yeah,
is
yeah,
Tommy Elliott's got his face wrapped and he's in a swamp. And it's like, shit. Okay.
yeah.
This is
Like
clearly going to feel right, right? No.
eventually, like by the end of the story, like I can't really like any. I don't really remember any depth
Anything.
it really added
Any
to the
depth. Yes.
character. Yeah,
So D for depth and the lack of it. Got
yeah,
it. Okay.
yeah,
I was
yeah.
because I gotta stand by. If I say something here, I gotta pretend that AJ Lieberman or the artists, I'm gonna
I
speak
know,
to
and I'm
them
trying
and I'm
to
gonna tell them the same grade. And I think,
what happened. Yeah.
and
But like so many individual parts are like, oh, that's cool. Oh, that art's cool. Oh, that story idea is cool. But then like you look at, but
I
then you
take
try to remember it. It's like, okay, oh,
and I try to take that into account too. Of like, did I dread having to quote unquote read any of these issues? No, absolutely not. There was a sense of like I'm trying to rehash what's going on here. What's the story that I'm reading here? And I was able
yeah,
to even like binge it. So it's not
yeah.
like I was having to wait
It
a
didn't. It
month
didn't
or
even hold
anything.
up to the binge.
And
Yeah,
yeah, and I was like, so I think I'd be around like a C minus, maybe
yeah,
persuade to a C. Um,
yeah.
but it's somewhere around there
And
because
then
it's
right,
unfortunate.
and
It's
then
just not
and
memorable.
as we're yeah, and as we're like going through the Hush saga, where is its place in the Hush saga? It doesn't really. It's not essential. It doesn't can really. You can leave it out and not really miss much.
Yeah.
So that's part of my factor
Our
too.
next story, Heart of Hush, it
Hmm.
doesn't need to reference it, and it would have been completely fine. Doesn't need to
Right.
reference any of it, But there's probably some
Right.
purists that are like,
And that's by
well, we
design,
need to
you know.
know. We need to know what. Wait, there's a gap here, and so
Mhm.
Paul Dini, he spends a page or something in a couple of panels to kind of say, reference a quick little rehash. But I guess I should say the next
Mhm.
chapter in which you and I are going to talk details. Heart of
Mhm.
Hush. It's your last
Mhm.
warning. Written by Paul
Mhm.
Dini, art by Dustin Nguyen. Detective Comics 846 to 850, launched in 2008, or that first chapter was in 2008.
Mhm.
Uh, this now was when Ryan Lauer was becoming a weekly
Yeah.
attendant of the
Right.
comic shop because I was in college. I was in a city now that had a couple different college comic shops around, so I was able to pick and choose which
Mhm.
ones. So I was in there weekly. I was skipping classes and buying comic books. That's what I was doing at this time
Nice.
period. So this was a very fun for me time in comics because it was the Grant Morrison era and it was
Right.
well, no, because they were tying it at the top of each issue of Heart of Hush was the RIP, Batman RIP. Because it was a
Yeah.
whole RIP, but up till RIP, I've said on here many times, hobby trivia, that the ride for Morrison's run was a blast. And I did
Mhm.
love the month to month with Morrison's run until RIP. And then that's the part that got me
Right.
frustrated. Up to this though,
Right. Right.
I
Right.
was all in on this. They did the resurrection of Ra's al Ghul that I was hunting down each chapter and I bought all those issues
Oh,
too.
I enjoyed that. I still
And
enjoy that.
the finale or epilogue of that, I think, was Detective Comics 840, which was Dini and Dustin Nguyen. And this was
Mhm.
my first exposure to Dustin Nguyen. And so then I bought the next 5 issues of Detective that had the same team. And then this was where for me, because even at this point, I didn't know that Hush Returns existed. So I saw Heart of Hush,
Right.
saw uh Wen's cover for this issue, and I thought his covers are awesome. And
Mhm.
I was very and Paul Dini, like he'd been on Detective for a while, and those issues have been
I was
great.
about to say, like, when did he,
He was in the
yeah,
eight
start?
twenties. I'm pretty sure. And is it
He has like actually there's
Simon?
like a whole collected thing, 821. Yeah, that's when
Okay,
he starts, right?
yeah, what a
Something like
fantastic
that.
run he had on Detective, which I know sounds like well, duh, Paul Dini.
Duh, but like, but you also have to understand it's like Paul Dini, like the Batman animated series writer, like the most iconic writer from
Hmm.
that series, co-creator of Harley Quinn, like coming to comics,
Yes,
bringing that same ethos. Take a drink every time I say ethos, but bringing that same idea of like one and done
and it was
comic
yeah,
book stories
and
in
it was
Batman and
like
Detective Comics. Yeah.
free reign because it wasn't Batman Adventures or Batman and Robin Adventures like
Yeah.
that was the show, the animated series in comic form. It was like, no, you've got do what you
Yeah.
want. So it
Yeah.
was a great time for him. And then when he got hooked up with Wen, and I was really digging Wen's style.
Yeah.
And so the story of Heart of Hush is that Tommy Elliott is back. He's totally wrapped. He's a pretty evil son of a bitch.
Yeah.
Because he's drugging people and he's got this his own little hospital that's off the books and drugged all these people that are working for him.
Yeah.
Um, and like the biggest, well, and it's a continuing thing here, and is his ability to manipulate Batman's villains. I think
Mm-hmm.
that like we saw it in the first Hush, which I know like people could say, the Riddler was a huge part of that, and I wouldn't disagree.
Yeah.
But I think Hush Returns, maybe there's a positive in it, is that he's still able to manipulate because he did manipulate Poison Ivy and was using her for, a means
Mm-hmm.
to his own end. And in Heart of Hush, he
Mm-hmm.
uses Scarecrow to do some pretty evil shit that
Yeah.
also have ramifications like that we're going to get to further in the Hush saga. So I think that's a huge characteristic of Hush that like he has this uncanny like ability of manipulation to people that you don't know
Yeah.
could ever be manipulated.
Yeah, like this storyline, what it does is it kind of like the original Hush, you
Hmm.
kind of get an idea of like who he is and how he came to be,
Yeah.
but also you're still a little up in the air of like what are the main traits that make this character tick.
Yeah.
Um, and in Heart of Hush, like Paul Dini really expertly kind of takes the baton from Loeb and expands it in a way of like, okay, what's he really about? Like,
Hmm.
what actually is going to continue to drive him in the future? And like, this is where the idea comes. This is really where, I mean, of course, all the seeds are planted in the
Hmm.
original story, but Paul Dini kind of takes it a big step further in terms of like to really illustrate just how obsessed Tommy Elliott is with Bruce Wayne specifically. Like a lot of the things that happened in their childhood kind of um, influences why he does what he does in that first story. But and then you come and you walk away from that initial story knowing like, oh, he was kind of bad all along, so you feel a little bit like, oh, he's just a bad guy, right? But or sometimes you're like, there's a lot of Batman villains that could be like, oh, this is kind of a mirror version of like what could have happened to Bruce Wayne if he didn't have like the same upbringing or privilege, or if Bruce Wayne decided to be a bad, mirror version of himself. And Hush kind of is that, but you also have that subtext of like, oh, he was always
Yeah.
an a-hole. He always was like even as a kid was like a murderous like psychopath
And I said it not
that
too
was able
long
to kind of
ago.
suppress it, right? To like and
Yeah.
still become like this like member of society, but like something, but I don't know, like there's something in there of like, well, at what point did he like really snap and decide to be this villain? And I think Heart of Hush is really trying to take that and expand on it.
Yeah, and I think, and I said it back on the 217 episode with talking to Heart of Hush, but this was only 5 issues, I think,
Yeah,
Heart of
yeah.
Hush, and I just think it's a tighter story, and Dini did a more concise job of adding depth to Tommy Elliott as a
Mm-hmm.
character. And
Mm-hmm.
that's not
Yeah.
raise Dini by belittling someone else. I just think he does a really good job of like putting some weight behind Tommy Elliott slash Hush as a character, you know.
Yeah.
And the
Totally.
flashbacks are very significant and like are very significant in forming the overall character of Tommy Elliott and giving some
Yeah.
more substance and some more
And
you
that's
can
something that he picks up from the original Hush also.
yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah.
it gives more to that Bruce Tommy relationship,
Yeah,
on this
exactly.
being more of a betrayal and the
Yeah.
obsession and then the lengths he goes to because at this time also picking up on Hush because Batman revealed himself to Catwoman and there was the love story aspect of
Right.
it of
Right.
keeping that close relationship between Catwoman and Batman, and so he
Mm-hmm.
knows that's a soft spot for Batman. So who does he go and get?
Yeah.
Catwoman.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah. He takes
literally,
all of it's almost,
I
yeah, go ahead.
was gonna say literally, like Heart of Hush, like the big moment there is what he does to Catwoman.
Mm-hmm.
It's like Dini is not a sadistic bastard. We've seen and read many things about Paul Dini. What a lovely gentleman. And it's so great when you get shocked by like some dark shit that somebody like that will unexpectedly give you. And when you turn that page
Mm-hmm.
to see that last page that when illustrates so like greatly of the magnitude of this of like
Yeah.
Hush freaking first of all when you feel like he gutted Catwoman in I think it's chapter
Yeah.
3.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
opens with
It's
this fight.
great comic book storytelling and imagery.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. And then he basically guts her and then he's manipulated the situation so Batman is like he is busy with something else that's also kind of dark and twisted of what the Scarecrow is doing to
Yeah.
a kid. And then to get the reveal at the end of that Catwoman's hooked up and like Hush stole her heart. And
Yeah.
it's like, what? And but
Yeah.
Dini built it up to earn that reaction, not
Yeah.
what? There's such a
Yeah.
difference in how, you say what. And it was
Yeah.
so like, oh my gosh, like, what's going on here? This is nuts. But he earned
Yeah.
it. And I think that helped push Hush back up. Like I think Hush Returns knocked
Yeah.
him down some pegs. This boosted him
Yeah.
towards like, okay, this guy's a
Yeah.
freaking threat again.
Yeah, it's like Dini took all of the things that that either really worked in the original story or things you really wanted to expand on in that original story and capitalized on them in a
Hmm.
really meaningful way. In terms of like the backstory and the flashbacks and the motivation and the Batman Catwoman dynamic,
Hmm.
which was a big deal in the original story. It's like, oh, you could kind of forget like how, now these days, thanks to things like the Tom King run, like how Batman and Catwoman, like how together they are, but like have it's a little bit forgotten in the original from the original Hush of like how big of a moment it was that like Batman revealed his identity
Yeah.
to Selina, in that original story. So having that be an element in this on
Us comic
top
readers
of
getting our soap opera. Oh my gosh, they love
well,
each
I
other. He
know it's the
revealed
soap.
himself.
It's such a good triangle in this story just because of like how intertwined, how much exploration you can do in the duality of Batman and Bruce Wayne with Hush and with Catwoman. So it's such a really interesting like dichotomy that they get presented with in this story. So like Dini just really kind of knocks it out of the park. And maybe he had like a 5-issue mandate or something like you can do the story, but you only have X issues. And so I don't know that maybe plus just having a really solid hook in terms of like, yeah, Hush is gonna take Catwoman's heart. I don't know. He's able to really stick with that, and it's still pretty incredible to this day that like that story was able to happen within the confines of like the crazy Grant Morrison RIP thing. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not really part of it. It's just kind of branded as it, and
Yeah.
ultimately it serves as kind of like all this happens right before all
Yeah.
the Bruce Wayne disappears or whatever.
Trying to figure out the
Yeah,
overall story of things is like it kind of doesn't matter because it can kind of not stand on its own, but if you have a broad sense of what's going on in Batman comics, you can read Heart of Hush and you're good. Um,
yeah, totally.
and
Hmm.
then I just think of Sean Wayans in Scary Movie, and I was like, but wait, there's more because
Hmm.
he also stole Bruce Wayne's face by having facial
Yes,
reconstruction surgery, and that's the
yes.
mass because I think that's the thing too.
That is a huge,
And
probably the
I
most enduring wrinkle probably
yeah,
from this story is that gets carried forward in other
yes.
media too. Yeah.
In that, oh man. So, first of all, I love like this is total comic bookiness that we love. Is it like it's like
Yeah.
Heart of Hush?
Yeah.
Man, he's
Yeah.
a kid to basically gets Bane venom and becomes like Bane. Batman puts Dr. Crane's face in a toilet, and Catwoman's heart gets stolen, and a guy
Hmm.
does facial reconstruction to make himself look like Bruce Wayne, and it's like, oh my God, take a
Hmm.
step out. And if you say that to an average person, they're gonna be like, you freaking dweeb.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
Paul Dini freaking earned the excitement here because that's something I think you could really like you could ask and maybe it could be a gimmick you start to get tired of too. I don't know, of like why does he keep wrapping his head in bandages? Like
Right.
that's a lot of
Yeah.
work. Why does he even do that? Like
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then to withhold that to where, at that second to last issue I think it was the reveal
Yeah.
of um he did
That
his face to
he's
look like Bruce Wayne's. And that's
yeah.
like Dini, you're doubling down on your holy shitness here on this story.
Yeah.
And then that is such a seed that like planted in this that totally works that yeah, we're gonna talk about in the next chapters
Yeah.
of this Hush saga
It
too. That's
works.
very important.
It's brilliant because it like works so well as a character trait and exploration of the Hush villain, but it serves really well for the weird uh comic book status quo that happens, during and after RIP. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yep. So, Heart of Hush, basically, and it's fresh in my mind because, I just read it recently, but Heart of Hush, I think, is an absolutely crucial chapter in the whole Hush saga. Like, you have to read Hush and you have to read Heart of Hush. And then I could almost argue of like, there are other things that are fun, sure, but these two are the required readings for Hush. And I think as a letter grade for
Yeah,
me, Heart of Hush is a freaking A.
yeah, it's an A. It's an easy A for
Yeah.
sure.
So we just kind of mentioned about how the facial, well, the rest, except let's see, let's one, two, three, next three big chapters of a Hush story, all Paul Dini, Dustin Nguyen. So it's like they were given
Hmm.
giving the
The
Bible on
keys.
Hush, the keys
Yeah.
and everything. And they're like, the keys, this is your vehicle. You get to drive it now for quite a while.
And I
So
think
they,
I think more context too is like
sure.
the like uh I don't know the exact dates, but like this is kind of around when Jeff Loeb kind of jumped ship from DC. Like he was doing DC stuff, he was working on Smallville and stuff early in the early 2000s. Before, I think that was maybe in the gosh, was that the same time or after Hush? It was
Smallville,
right
I
around that
thought
same
was
time.
2001, wasn't it?
2001, yeah, but like Loeb was working on the show in season around
Oh, okay.
2005 when Batman Begins came out. Yeah, so I would have been post Hush
Okay.
is when he came in, I guess. But yeah, then at some point Loeb kind of starts doing Marvel stuff, and he did a lot of Marvel television stuff, and so kind of he was kind of out of comics or DC especially. So like it kind of made sense for um somebody else to kind of pick up the baton and run with it. And like Paul Dini was like, it just felt like, oh, this is a gift, to have,
Yeah.
because like they were, in the Batman animated series, like they were able to put like their good, almost definitive take and definitive spin on these uh classic Rose Gallery characters, but then to have Dini come back into the comic book form and put his stamp on one of the most popular like enduring modern Batman villains that hadn't been in that format yet, I think was a really
Yeah.
smart
I do
match
too.
made in heaven.
It
Yeah.
just had a great, Deanie's got something here. He has a
It's a
vision
pedigree. Yeah.
into which, I have no idea how the behind the scenes talks were with him of like continuing his story, but clearly he
Yeah.
had a lot more to go with because there were two issues. It's called Last Rites, and
Hmm.
in the Faces of Evil era, this is
Yeah.
Batman has been Omega sanctioned, Final Crisis is done, blah blah blah. They're
Yeah.
featuring the villains and all this,
Tie-in
and
issues. Yeah.
so
Line-wide.
there was Detective Comics 852 was the Hush centric one, and then Batman number 685 was Catwoman sort of centric, but they both served as an epilogue to Heart of Hush of like
Hmm.
what happens when after Heart of Hush wraps. I feel like both issues could have been justified to be included in the Heart of Hush
I think
collected
so.
version. I
Hmm.
think that came out in a
Hmm.
hardcover and a trade. I double dipped and bought
Hmm.
the issues as they come out, and then I bought
Oh
the
yeah.
hardcover.
Yeah.
And not
Yeah.
reprinted
I
a
would be
ton.
remiss if Yeah, I would be remiss if I didn't bring up the great John Beerley here, right? Like because like this is when he was writing Heart of
Mm,
Hush was when he was definitely in the middle in the thick of his like iconic reviewing period for Batman on film, and he was
hmm.
like he would sing the praises of Heart of Hush specifically so often because he's like people need to read this book. This book is
Yeah.
amazing. So like every time I believe like every time a new version or a hardcover would come out, he'd be like, I'm just gonna review the hardcover so I
I
can talk about how great this story is and like
want to talk about the
look at the
skip.
cover, look at
Yeah.
the art, look at the story. Like, please read this book. So I that's definitely stands out. He was a huge advocate of that. It's fun when people, BOFers will come out and like really like double triple down on like certain stories, in a
Hmm.
positive way.
Do you think, well, I'm trying to see if I can pull them up to reference a little bit more, but those two issues, um, that served as like the epilogues. I'm trying to think if the end of the Hush one, if that ended where he was incarcerated, quote unquote, but in like the Wayne Tower
Mm-hmm.
building. It ended on
Mm-hmm.
that note, right? Be because the fallout of that was like as Catwoman basically because Hush, and I thought this was done really well. You see his travels of how he's able to scheme his way to get out of the country to go down to what, Australia,
Yeah. Yeah.
maybe,
Yeah. 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 But then they
and
kind of like so at the end
flip a
of
bunch
that
of
Faces of
money and
Evil, yeah, they kind of like they capture him and then they'll be like, yeah, he looks like Bruce, but like we're gonna like have him captive until we can figure out what to do with you. But
yeah.
so it leaves him in kind of a holding pattern until like the next thing.
So those two issues I think are like they're not required reading, but
Mm-hmm.
it is some fun
Mm-hmm.
connective tissue if you need
Mm-hmm.
explanations on some things. So the fact
Mm-hmm.
that it's still Dini and Wen, there's a nice continuity,
Mm.
going there with those two. So, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I'll just say they're a little chapter, but they are part of the Hush story. So I think they serve
Mm.
as very fine like bees in my head.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Sure.
Fair, Ryan Brain. So
Yeah.
because Paul
Yeah.
Dini had so much Hush story to tell, and because what he was just so amazing, he and Wen were able to
Yeah.
launch a new comic series called Batman Streets of
Yes.
Gotham. I was
Yes.
in
I
on the
was
ground
so
floor of this.
excited. I was, yeah, same here. I was so excited when that got announced and everything because it's like, oh my gosh, that like, as by that point it'd been like, oh, like Paul Dini, Justin Win, what a great like
What a
writer
great team.
artist pair. What a great team. By then, like it was
But
like part of that like Batman Reborn era. So now like they
yeah,
can do a little bit more with it. Um, and oh, they can have their own thing. Because I think gosh, Paul Dini was just doing so much around this time. Because was this after Gotham City Sirens had kind of run its
they
course?
launched it. I think they launched it like the same time.
Oh, really?
because he's
Okay.
because even in these Streets of Gotham issues, Hush kind of references about Catwoman and your friends, like something with your friends, or somebody comments about her friends or whatever. And I was picking up both series, each issue when it was coming
Okay.
out.
Gotham City Sirens 1 is August 2009, and then Streets of Gotham 1 is August 2009. So there you go.
Yeah, and I think I don't know if it's pronounced Guillaume March.
Ian, yeah.
He was
Yeah.
the first artist on Gotham City Sirens, so the pages looked
Yes.
really good. In which I think
Yeah.
that got released or it is getting released in the new regular book size DC reprints that just launched
Okay.
what last year, I think.
Yeah, that
But
makes
yeah, like
sense.
the
That
Gotham
makes
City
sense.
Sirens, those are that's included in one of them. Um,
Yeah, that makes sense.
So then Streets of Gotham, the first chapter of that, which I should also mention that Dustin Wen, he continues like the watercolor covers that he was doing for Heart of Hush. He continues it for the Streets of
Yep.
Gotham covers, and I freaking
Yep.
love those covers.
So beautiful. So
I
beautiful. Yeah.
think a friend at work got me a magnet of Streets of Gotham #1, but just the art, not like the title or anything on it, just the art, a
Yeah, just
magnet,
like
and that's
blank.
at work. Yep, and
Yeah.
it looks great.
Yeah.
So the
Yeah.
first four issues of Streets of Gotham,
Yep.
Dini and Wen launched, like you just mentioned, in 2009. And this like
Mm-hmm.
arc is summarized, especially on the DC app, Hush Money, because you're
Hush
seeing now
money.
the fallout of how, okay, Bruce Wayne is missing.
Mm-hmm.
Clearly, Gotham City doesn't know that. And then here's this villain that has a face that looks like Bruce Wayne. And it's a fun idea of what if this guy goes public and he doesn't confess that he's
Yeah.
Tommy Elliott? He pretends he's Bruce Wayne to the public eye. And
And how does it's like you have a it's a cool it's probably the best kind of story. Again, Paul Dini taking like weird concepts and making them like good stories within
yeah,
comic book continuity. It's
that's
like
what he's good at.
you have a fake Bruce Wayne and you have a fake Batman who
Hmm.
who was Dick Grayson, and how do those two entities collide and clash? Yeah, I thought it's a cool way to explore those aspects of the characters. Yeah,
And
and speaking to the core of Batman without like
yep.
having Bruce Wayne Batman.
And so like what he does, he finds a way to kind of scheme his way out of getting out of the little Wayne penthouse jail and ends up in front of cameras, and he's just giving Bruce Wayne money left and right, and not just like
Mm-hmm.
$100 but like billions to this,
a
billions to that.
hundred bucks.
He's like, I'm
Yeah.
just, and I think it's fun to watch coming off of him being a really evil uh man. This is fun of where
Mm-hmm.
he's kind of being a shithead. It's like a difference, and it's
Mm.
and it's entertaining to watch Dini with what he does and how the character reactions to walking the tightrope around him, because they can't let the secret out of like what the whole story is. It's just like going with the flow, but how do we kind of
Mm-hmm.
silence him? How do we get him out of the spotlight? And it's a really fun angle, I think, to the Tommy Elliott story. And then something I always find kind of endearing is how he's, even though everything that's happened, Elliot still has like a little soft spot for Alfred. Like Dini will throw in lines
Mm.
where Elliot's very much of like, you're the last person that I'd want to hurt, Alfred. Something. It's always just like he doesn't have anything against Alfred. I don't know. Something about that always clicks for me of like,
That's
seems like
cool. It's a cool
it's,
character connection.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's weird, but also it's like it totally works for me. So Hush Money,
Mm-hmm.
I think, is a fun story arc for the
Mm-hmm.
character.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's another avenue where, like I said, like Dini's able to take like comic book continuity and explore the characters and add some dimension in ways you wouldn't didn't really know you needed,
Yeah.
and it's kind of and in a lot of ways, like Heart of Hush was so good and did so much for the character that he uses this framework of current comic book continuity to kind of like give you more in a different way, which
Hmm.
is great. It's not essential because of the way that it's positioned in continuity, but it's very rewarding if you have put the work in and read the other stuff.
Yeah. Good call. Um,
Yeah.
what kind of grade would you give it?
So with all that in mind, I think I would give it a B plus, just to kind of like it's good. Like it's definitely good. The art's great. The writing, like it's not super essential, but it's rewarding if you put the
Hmm.
work in. So I think for me that brings it to a B plus.
Yeah, for me, I think I go with a B plus because I think it's fun, and I think Dini has an opportunity to do something unique to keep this story going, and
Yeah.
and I remember then being entertained by it, and even now being entertained by it, because at the time too was a whole
Yep.
like, I'm still Bruce Wayne is Batman. It's just how it is for me. Bruce Wayne is
Yep.
Batman. And
Yep.
at this
Why is that so
time,
hard? Does it say? Yeah.
Dick Grayson was Batman, but Scott Snyder, he'd done the Black Mirror, which I freaking
Yep.
love.
Yep.
Morrison ends up doing Batman and Robin, and even though I hated
Yep.
Damian, how he was doing Dick Grayson as Batman with Damian as Robin worked so much better than I think it had any right to be. So it's like they were winning
Exactly.
me over of doing a really good job with making Dick Grayson different, but also like
They were
still Batman at his core.
compelling stories despite not being our
Yeah.
Batman. Yeah.
Um, and so yeah, like this had me. This was a fun like B plus arc for me.
Mm-hmm.
And then Streets of Gotham, it
Sure.
planted some seeds for, because I actually just, in going through these, because I hadn't read these for quite a long time, um, I went ahead and just read the whole Streets of Gotham series because it was like 21 issues
Oh,
maybe.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
and it diverted at one point to a Huntress Man Bat two-parter. There's always these
Right.
backups with
Just
Man.
like yeah,
Go ahead.
just like I was saying with Gotham Knights, it's like eventually a lot of these series start out so strong and then all of a sudden
Yeah,
they
and
kind of like it's
and
like
they were
okay.
really, really working this Manhunter backstory and
Yeah.
a villain
They
in
really
there
try
with
to make
Jane
Manhunter a
Jane
thing.
Doe, and
Yeah.
I think
Mm-hmm.
they were doing what like Detective Comics used to do back in the day. Of there would be like a 10-page short story of another uh,
Mm-hmm.
DC character tacked on at the end of the Batman issue and stuff. And so they were doing that here, and
Yeah.
the Jane Doe part does come into play, and we'll get to that here in this next chapter of
Mm-hmm.
House of Hush,
Mm-hmm.
where Tommy Elliott as Bruce Wayne. Well, Bruce Wayne's back now, and this story for me, this one was fuzzy as well. Cause I'm like, man, what all happened in House of Hush? And I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
this one is just fine because
Yeah.
what I realized in reading it this time is it's a little unclear to me now, even and this one I just like read, and it's a little fuzzy of they
Yeah.
bring in Dr. Death for something, and
Yeah.
um there is just so much flashback to
Yep.
Gotham decades ago, in which the
Yep.
Waynes aren't and Elliots aren't necessarily a huge part of it. And it's just talking
Yeah.
about these new characters, and I just got a little impatient and questioning
Yeah.
how much do I really need or care about this? And I kind of
Yeah.
didn't.
Yeah. I remember like at the time reading this, I was like really excited about it because I was like, oh yeah, like more Hush, it's going to be kind of a big multi-part story or whatever. But I do remember like with the backups and everything, it just felt like I remember it felt like a long wait, although there weren't many delays with the book or anything necessarily from what I remember, but it just felt like I wasn't getting enough story like
Yeah.
month to month to month to where it just felt like, wait, what? Like what am I reading? And so maybe it does it come across better like in a trade collected form because it is like a lot of subtext and things like filling the gaps, right?
Yes. Now, I'm not gonna say it's a completely different story, Hoss. It's a totally different vibe reading it. Like, nope. I remember they did pull a good old bait and switch, and I want to see. Nope, not that one. It must have been Streets of Gotham number 14, which said House of Hush Part One.
Mm. Yeah.
Has a
Yep.
great cover, and they did the old bait and switch. And 13 pages in, it shows Jane Doe and then says to be continued. And then the next
Yeah.
20 pages are a continuation of like a Two-Face backup story. And I remember
See,
feeling
that's what
so
I'm
ripped
saying. I
off,
was
and I was
like,
pissed.
what? It like flipped, right? Didn't it
Yeah,
flip where it was like
pissed me
it was
off.
like more backup instead of the main story? So I remember
Yep,
just being like, yeah,
yep. I was an angry nerd at the time because I did. I was like, "Oh, you sons of bitches, you ripped me off on this one." And then the next issue was not House of Hush. So you had a like 13 pages of issue
oh,
14. Next month is issue 15, which is
and they
completely
skipped it
all
completely
Two-Face.
different. That's what it was. That's what it
Then
was.
what?
I was like,
Yeah.
wait, it just lost me. It lost
Yeah.
me early on. Yeah,
And I was a little
yeah,
frustrated. I was like, you dicks. And then the story itself was not as compelling as what Dini had done up to this point with Hush, I didn't
right,
think. And I'd say that the lasting impact of House of Hush
yeah,
is what happens at the very end of the final issue, issue 21,
mm,
in which Jane
mm-hmm.
Doe, you find out. So Tommy takes, like, Jane Doe cuts off Tommy's face, which is Bruce Wayne's
Right,
face, and puts it
right,
on
like that. He's
herself.
like trying. Yeah, he's trying to like I don't know if it was like he's trying to reset things to the status
Yeah.
quo to get his face back off. Yeah, it wasn't exactly. Yeah.
And so then it's like, okay, well, then that continues to where when Tommy Elliott is locked up, like he's got the bandaging on his face, but this is like, well, this is justified because he doesn't have a face. So that at least has like, okay, what do I remember from House of Hush? That at least. Like he was literally stripped of the Bruce Wayne face, didn't have a face. Eventually that's gonna
Yeah.
heal, but I think that might end up looking gnarly.
Right. Right.
So, House of Hush, uh, what do you give it for a grade?
C plus, B minus. Like it's not Hush Returns territory, but again, it feels unessential despite some of the big ticket items.
Yeah.
Like you can put in a checkbox like, oh, Hush Money was like fake Batman versus fake Bruce Wayne, and then by the time you get to the House of Hush, it's like, oh, now Bruce Wayne's back in the picture, and you kind of get to recalibrate with
Yeah.
the status quo again, and then you get Hush in an interesting position again.
Yep.
So yeah, that's kind of where it leaves. It's like you get excited about like, oh, it's their final confrontation and where are they gonna go from here? But I remember being at the end of this being like I wanted to see where it goes from there more than what I got out of that story in and of itself, which is
Yep.
kind of sad because it's like it was like the third part of a trilogy of a
Yeah.
Dini, Win Hush trilogy.
Yep. Yep.
And I
Exactly.
felt like this is kind of where the continuity and the comic stuff around it kind of like didn't serve what you ultimately got. And then just the wonky way it was released. Like going it kind of reset my mind going back through the release. I'm like, why was that? Why I remember it feeling weird at the time, but that illustrated why, because you had the backups and the backups became the main story and you didn't
Yeah.
get much and it was hard to follow and
Was this
yeah.
Two-Face story so freaking important? Like,
I mean, there could have
or
been plenty of like maybe Wynn needed an extra month for
yes,
cards and the
exactly.
writing. Like it's probably that's why they
We
do
don't
those things
know.
is so they can not delay in a comic book, right?
Yep.
That's
Yeah.
the con of that's the as in that's one of the negative things about having to have a comic book every single month is like sometimes these multi-part stories don't
Yep.
work out the way that they are intended to.
I think I'm with you, and it does hurt me to rate a Paul Dini story as a C plus, but I just
Sure.
it's not too memorable for me. And then in revisiting it, something I do remember is the flashbacks on this other stuff that I just don't know in the end how much it really mattered to me. Um, I
Yeah.
just I don't think it. I don't know, and Paul Dini could come in here and justify why it matters and probably convince me. And be, yes, sir, whatever you say. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's okay. I have all of
Yeah.
these in the hardcovers that came out because
Right.
um that's me. I'm a completist. But I think
Sure.
this is like you said of a kind of a trilogy, a Hush trilogy for Dini and Wen. This one kind of falls to the bottom
Yeah.
overall
Yeah.
for me.
They can't sadly they can't all be winners,
That's
but
true.
oh yeah, so
That's true.
you put this even below Hush Returns.
No, I think Hush Returns, I thought I said was like a C minus.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah, and
But you
if
put it
and
at the bottom of the Dini
yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
Okay.
Of the Dini stuff. Is that what you meant by Dini doing his own little trilogy?
Yeah, it's
Okay,
like a
okay,
Dini
gotcha.
Hush
Okay,
trilogy.
okay,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah, yeah.
okay,
That's
okay,
what I meant.
okay.
That's what I
Leo
meant.
wants, Leo gets. Okay, okay. And then the last thing to tack on here is by far the most recent. We can
Hmm.
say also, yes, the character of Hush is, mentioned and like briefly has something nods, whatever, in the Arkham games. He did pop up, I thought, in Batman #1 of Rebirth, uh, or not Rebirth. I'm sorry, New
Um,
52. He was in Eternal. All those I just kind of left out of our discussion for the sense of like, I don't.
you don't
I'm
want to
going
talk
by the
about
Hush Saga
the
omnibus.
you don't we don't I don't remember if is the does the omnibus have the weird like wedding issue thing that has like
No,
Nightwing versus Hush.
no, because I remember reading that and I
So
thought
there's
that
that.
sucked.
We talk. I remember when the wedding thing happened. Like I think you and me were one of the few people out of our group that was like reading all of the tie-ins for that,
Yeah.
and it was just like the
Yeah.
weirdly what the Batgirl Riddler one was like the best one out of all those. I
Yeah,
think.
I think so. Because there was one that I'm like, okay, I like this one. And then all the rest I was like, nah. I'm
Yeah.
good. I'm good. But all those I thought like I can justify I can agree the Hush Saga omnibus of like these inclusions of like, yeah, because even like the lesser ones, they are referenced. What
Yeah.
happens in Returns is referenced.
Yeah.
Where House of Hush ends, like I don't know. I think probably is a point going forward, like as far as the face. Like who knows Whose face is he
Yeah.
stealing next time around? I don't know. Maybe it's
Yeah.
Alfred's, and Alfred's back from the dead. It's Tommy Elliott.
Yeah.
Um,
Exactly.
but we were treated in 2022 to a Hush 20th anniversary edition, and at the back
Yep.
of that was a nice little prologue from writer Jeff Loeb and artist Jim Lee.
Hmm.
Nothing insane crazy. They called it the Aftermath. It says, as a special bonus for fans, DC Comics is proud to present this brand new tale for Batman and Hush's 20th anniversary, brought to you by the original creative team. Um, I think it definitely it was a tease of, I think, of just like, yeah, more Hush is coming. And
Yeah.
the pages are pretty. It follows immediately after the first Hush story in which Batman jumps off the bridge and goes looking for Hush, can't find him, but finds a trench coat, finds a body, and then Hush, he swims ashore and is greeted by Joker in full fantastic
Yeah.
gangster mob
Yeah.
uniform, purple uniform, and then Harley is Harley Quinn in that suit, and it's a nice little just like, huh, okay, so this has got to be, and I'm not doing a whole I always knew because we know that Hush Tua is coming.
Yeah.
But
Right.
I think we were talking about it as soon as we read it, and we were like, that means more Hush is coming. More Hush is coming for sure. Why would they do this unless more Hush
Right.
is coming? And it's
I
called
mean, yeah, because
Prologue,
now,
the Aftermath. Like,
yeah.
Prologue. Okay.
Yeah. It's just like I said, like now Loeb is back on back in the DC world. He's kind of on fire. It's cool. It's like, we were like,
Hmm.
oh, like Dini's back. He's doing this stuff. And now like Loeb is back and we've got like the long Halloween, stuff happening again. And he's coming back to do Hush 2 again with Jim Lee. So like they're revisiting, it's like greatest hits of greatest hits, right? And
Hmm.
so for one, I'm all for this. Like it's bringing back these creators you just want to see more of. And
Yeah.
as long as they're willing to keep doing it and it's good stuff, like comic books are always built upon that like melodrama. It's like, oh yeah, but this happened, this one thing you didn't see, and this one little breadcrumb leads to more breadcrumbs. It's just fun storytelling.
So I don't know that it's fair to even give like a little prologue thing like this a grade.
Right.
I
I don't think
think.
so. It's just one of those like because I'm looking at it right now on DC Universe
Mhm.
Ultra Infinite Ultra whatever. And
Infinite Ultra.
yeah, and even in the main Hush storyline, there was like a little interlude thing that was only in like Wizard, right? And then
Yeah.
they were able to like add that into like some of the collected versions later on, so even at the time, like, oh, you would kind of there were little extra little pieces of that. So that's kind of baked into his DNA. And it's not as I don't want to say egregious as like, oh, you had to read all these like different crossover events or whatever, but it's just these little extra little puzzle pieces, that kind of fit within
Well, speaking of
the
that,
framework.
Justice League Unlimited #1, remember that had like a two-page little Hush thing that was included at the very end.
For the animated
No,
Justice League
the new
Unlimited.
series that came out this past November.
Oh,
And yeah,
no,
like
I
one
didn't read it.
a big selling point, yeah, was like a two-page thing, and it's just like Hush is moving pieces around on a board. He may have done another
Oh.
Aristotle quote,
Oh, one of the
and so
all-in books.
it's
Okay.
like, oh, okay, like, all right, cool, yeah. Jim Lee still got it.
Oh, I see.
Scott Williams
Features Hush 2
still got it.
Prelude. Oh, I'm gonna have to read that then.
It's a
That's
very
weird.
it's very quick. And
Okay. I'm sure
it
I
was
can find it on
completely fine.
Infinite here. Okay.
Infinite.
Sweet.
But I think between that prologue and this prelude, like setting up, because I think there has been discussion of it's called Hush 2, but there has been, let me count here real quick.
So many. Yeah,
Uh,
that's the question. That's the question. Like, where does this take
one,
place? Is this
two,
modern continuity? How many of
three,
these things happened? Yeah.
4 Hush stories since the original Hush.
Right.
Um, There was a sequel to Hush. It was called Hush Returns. This is Hush 2. Where does it fit? I do think between
Yeah.
the prologue,
Like
it
even
makes
on
you think
like
this
DC
follows
Universe.
immediately after the original from Loban Lee.
Well, that's kind of, I think, for better or worse, that's kind of what DC wants you to
Yeah,
wants like the public at large to think like you
that's the selling
read
point.
Hush 2. That's
Make
the
it
selling
simple.
point. Buy
Yep.
Hush, buy Hush 2. You know,
Yep.
even if you go on to DC Universe Ultimate Ultra whatever and search for Hush, like it gives you these storyline tabs and I see Heart of Hush, Batman Hush, Hush Money, and the House of Hush, and Hush Returns is like not included in that, you know?
I don't need to think about that. And
Yeah.
so it doesn't. I don't know. I'm with you on read Hush, then read Hush 2. This
Yeah.
make it simple, and then the people will give it a shot. The more work people have
Yeah.
to do, the easier it is for them to say, "Nah, I'm good," and just pass. So
Yeah.
it'll be awesome if somehow they do it where it is a timeless kind of story where you don't need to know much and you can just dive right in. Like I said, you and
Yeah.
I have read the first issue
Yeah.
at this point. The first issue read great for me. But it would totally make sense because then there will be complaints if it's not connected to the first one. It's like, well, it's called
Yeah,
Hush 2 for a
like
reason. So
oh
I don't
yeah,
know.
ultimately like it'll be good if Hush 2 captures that same vibe from the
Yeah,
like original where it's like you're rewarded if you know the continuity and you've read all the stuff, but like it's not essential. Like I think it'll just be better served for everybody, for all parties
yeah,
involved, right? If it's accessible and if you read Hush one, that's good. If you and then you go in like um people also kind of forget that like the original Hush also has some very specific continuity things that were
hmm
baked in that people kind of forget about. Like, oh, like there's some Huntress stuff in there. Oh,
yeah.
Harold's in there. Harold dies
Harold,
in Hush.
R.I.P.
You know, poor
He's
Harold
still hurting about
R.I.P.
that one.
They
He's
really,
still hurting.
I know, they really should have just renamed Hush Harold R.I.P. Right before Batman R.I.P.
That's the
because it's
face
like,
Tommy's taking is
you
Harold's.
know, because I remember like at the time it was like even like the scuttlebutt, you could get like these rumors for like, oh, like a major Batman character is gonna die in the next issue. You're like, oh my God, who's it gonna be? Commissioner Gordon who's gonna
No,
die? They're like,
Harold.
Harold? Who
He
remembers
just
Harold?
popped in for a
He was
page,
still in the
and then he's dead.
Batcave, even though you
Yeah,
haven't seen him for like 6 years. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So I look forward to whatever's going. Of course, obviously, whatever's going to be delivered by Loban and Lee. Give it to me. I'm good. I'm in.
Yeah. And
So
how many issues is Hush 2? I think I've asked you this many times. Is it 12
12.
again?
Yes, but there's
Are we getting more than
I
one a month?
they're doing 6 and then taking a break and then the 6 which Lee has said is going to put the capper on the Hush story. But
Oh,
if you
like they're
count
gonna
it,
end it.
yeah. Well, I mean that was he says gonna be like roughly said like yeah, it's gonna put like a almost like a finality to the Hush story. Whatever.
Wow, that's
Okay.
cool. I I
C-
I approve that. So like we'll have
6
six, and
issues
then we're gonna
because
we're
6
gonna
is good.
redo Bat Six is good, and then we're gonna have Batman number one,
Yes. And I did. I even
and
did the old
then
like
sometime later.
March, counting on my fingers, March, April, May, and I'm like, oh yeah, that means that the 6th chapter of it will be, yeah, the month before it
The
relaunches
last
Batman number
thing,
one. Okay,
yeah, like that's they have that built in. So okay, so it will be 12, but there will be a wait.
and I'm
So
glad that
again, that's
they,
also kind of, and then they can
I,
sell just like the original Hush. They'll sell a 6 issue like hardcover or something
yep, and
probably.
I'll buy it because I'm a sucker for
I'll totally
that.
buy it.
Thinking for some
More
reason I
Hush.
can't wait until they do a whole collected version and then absolute it. I'll end up getting it all, but that's how they
Yeah.
get their money. They know what we're gonna do.
Yeah.
So I
Hmm.
think that served as a. I hope that was a valuable
Hush primer.
primer. Yeah, I was trying to think of I was like, what is the word? Valuable Hush primer, but Haas yet again. But wait, there's more. I've got some questions
Ooh.
for you.
Oh, let's do it.
Yes, you've got a question?
These can be as quick or lengthy as you want of an answer. Something thinking about all of this, Paul Dini and AJ Lieberman have written
Mm-hmm.
more Hush / Tommy Elliott than Jeff Loeb.
Ah.
Dustin Wen
Mm-hmm.
has illustrated more Hush than Jim Lee at this point. Like at this point, who do you think
Mm-hmm.
is the definitive Hush writer and who is the definitive Hush artist? After Hush 2 completely, like the whole all 12 come out, then
Mm-hmm.
Loeb and Lee will have written and drawn more Hush
More.
than the others.
Mm-hmm.
But at this moment,
Mm-hmm. At
so who do you
this
think's the
moment,
definitive writer and artist?
this is so interesting because unlike some other Batman villains or characters, the people that have put their stamp on Hush is relatively small. Like you look at, Joker or
Yeah.
Riddler or even Bane at this point. They're in many stories, they're in many hands have touched them. Um, but man, I gotta say, like looking at the trajectory of the character overall, I would say Dini is the writer and Lee is the artist. Yeah, I think I would say that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It is Ryan Brain Day because I'm with you.
Yay.
There's no offense to Dustin Wen. Love Dustin Wen.
No,
Actually
it's no offense to any of them. It's
got him
yeah.
to sign, I think the first Heart of Hush issue, maybe the first two, first and last, maybe two issues. I don't know. In Chicago a couple years ago, and then I actually will see
Mm,
him in Chicago here in April, and I think I'm going to take my other issues and have him sign those too. Love his art. I do. I love it in this part, but
yeah.
it's sort of sometimes unfair if you are put up against Jim Lee. Like I think Jim
Totally.
Lee just
Absolutely.
his oh like
Yeah.
wonderful. And then for a
Yeah.
writer, I'm with you. I'm like, I do think Dini did more for me for the character
Yeah.
than Loeb did. And then we'll see how Hush
Hmm.
2 plays out. But yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm
Dini and Lee.
really curious to see because now it is the like the original Hush was like Loeb is great. He's an amazing writer, but like of
Obviously.
course like the highlight of that story was like, look, Jim Lee's in
Yeah.
DC, he's drawing Batman, and so like we've had that for years and years at this point. So
Yeah.
and we've had and so now and we've also had a lot of expansion on Hush as a character since then
Hmm.
too. So neither one, Loeb or Lee, can really rest on their laurels and just do more of the same. Um, or do more just because. Like, and I always felt like it's felt like neither of these guys have to do Hush too. Like,
Agreed.
hopefully they don't they don't have to do this. Like Lee's been like president of like the DC and stuff for so long. Like that surely they wouldn't be doing this unless they had a really good reason to.
Yep.
And to hear
I
what you
agree.
just said about like, oh, the fact that they're gonna do the 6 issues and let things rest a while and then come back with like the second half of the story and it'll be kind of a wrapping up the story. That sounds awesome to me. Like
Yeah.
and just like Loeb is doing with the last Halloween, right? It's like there's a sense of completion of finality of like
Yep.
putting a capper on somebody's stories, like he's putting the final word on some things. And so like I think that's great. I think Hush is a character that could definitely serve from some sort of definitive ending or some sort of like
I agree.
culmination of what he was created for. And I think that's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. And the way that they did it too, of because what I'd read and Scuttlebutt, now obviously there was no confirmation this is exactly, but I read enough reports to see Zdarsky's final like arc was going to be twice a month to get to Hush 2, but then they pushed it back for his issue to be once a month to give Lee more time so that there wouldn't be any delays for Hush 2. And I'm
Mm,
thinking there's
hmm.
probably like we'll see after that sixth chapter ends how I feel.
Yeah.
Um,
Right, right,
but
right.
in thinking of the whole
I just hope
context,
it's
it's
not
probably a
too long
good
of a
of a break, yeah.
yeah.
And like
It's
giving
probably
him
it.
time to so that
Yeah.
he's not burnout because you read the in the Absolute Edition, which is a great interview with Lee and
The
like
interviews. Yeah.
just like how it was very stressful to for him to do his thing under such time
Hmm.
restraints. And so
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
break I think to get the best from the two of them, I think is probably going to be a good thing.
Yeah.
That was question one. Okay, the other ones will be quicker, I promise. Which Hush story is your favorite?
Hush Story is my favorite. I would say the original. I always go back to it. It's so easy, it's so accessible. The art's great. It's just fun to just flip through. Um, you can always kind of come back to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's whenever you need like a Batman reset or a palate cleanser, like it's always a good Batman story to just binge through if you need something like that. So I will always like that's and just for me like the fact that it was like a story that got me into consistent monthly weekly comic books like it's such an important
Hmm.
central story for that reason. So yeah, it's so many reasons why I would pick that one.
I'm with you. It's I didn't experience it as it was coming out. I was late to the game, but it's for me it stood the test of time of it is one
Yeah,
for I want some fun Batman story
yeah.
time and it's
I
one
don't get tired
especially
of it. Every
I don't
time
either.
I go back to it, it's like, yeah, this is as good as I remember. This is fun. It takes me back to those memories and the feelings and the like.
Yeah.
I read it, and I'm just like, yeah, this is comics. This is good. This is good comics right here, and
Yep.
that's a good feeling because it's easy to lose that when
Hmm.
you are mired in the I have to read every issue or like, oh,
Yep.
comics suck now or like,
It's such
oh,
comfort.
this
It's
it
comfort.
it's
It's comic book
comfort.
comfort
Yeah,
of
if you ever get like drug into the there's so many like random titles or reboots or storylines or mega series or whatever, it's like, oh, let's just read Hush. Let's
yep.
read some good comics.
Yeah.
That's a good, always good to go back to.
Which Hush story is your favorite or is the best? Not is your favorite, just ask.
Is
Which
the
Hush story is the
best.
best? Those are two
That
different
would be
questions, favorite and best.
those favorite and best. Yeah, favorite is Hush, best is Heart of Hush. It just takes everything about the character and says so much about them. Like, so yeah. And it just lets me
Our
say
our
something different. So
our answers are going to differ soon, I'm sure, but I'm right there with you on that. I do think Heart
hmm.
of Hush is the best Hush story so far.
You think our
Um,
answers will differ? You think Hush 2 will be that big of a game changer
no. I'm saying like
to
which
change the answers?
the next couple
Oh,
questions.
Oh,
Yep.
okay. Maybe it will differ. Okay.
Next ones I have, it will be pretty shocking if we have the same answers, I think, because there's a
Mm.
lot of options. But yeah, I
Mm.
think it's similar to me of like, a lot of people say, well, The Dark Knight is a better movie, but Batman Begins is a better Batman movie. I hate that. I know what they're
Yeah,
trying to
yeah, yeah.
say. I freaking hate that because The Dark Knight is a freaking Batman movie. Others
Yeah.
will say The Dark Knight, I think, is a better movie. I like Batman
hmm
Begins more. That's my comfort go to. And I'm like, now that I can totally understand and be like, Heart of Hush is a better story. I find myself going back to Hush more. I get it.
mm hmm
But I just,
hmm
for all the reasons I said a few months ago, and then you and I have said, that's why I think Heart of Hush is flat out the better or the best story of the Hush saga.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Which Hush story surprised you the most?
Heart. Yeah. It
Our
surprised me the
answers are the
most
same.
just because yeah, I mean, yeah, because like after the disappointment of Hush Returns, like like, oh, Paul Dini on Hush this is gonna be good, but I just remember being like, oh, shocking, shocking. Oh, this is, oh no, oh wow. I just
Yeah.
remember literally being surprised of like, how are they going to get out of this? What does this mean? Yeah. So,
Yeah. Same for me. And I didn't do myself any favors in how I read the first Hush. I wasn't into
mm,
monthly reading because I just had no accessibility to it. So, I read
mm-hmm,
the back half of Hush. Well, you need the front half to help with that payoff. You need the context of full on Jason. I knew that Jason Todd had died. I think I had death in the family. And
mm-hmm,
so it did, I was aware and was like, wait, what? But I think
Mm.
not reading it month to month and not,
Mm.
reading that first half, it didn't hit me as much. Whereas I was an avid monthly reader at Heart of Hush when it had its multiple moments of holy shit, So
Yeah.
that one
Yeah,
just
yeah,
did
yeah.
flat out surprise me more.
Yeah, I mean, in the moment, reading Hush as it released, I remember the issue where you're not sure who Hush really is, and then the the Robin, Jason Todd Robin skeleton specter like cover issue, and that feeling like, oh crap, like it's crazy to think like, oh, back when that came out, like that was Jason Todd was still dead, like that was
Yeah.
like the first seeds that were planted, like, oh, Jason Todd could come back. And that feeling like at the time, like, ooh, I'm in the ground floor of this potential big Batman family, shift, like of another seminal moment in Batman lore is like unfolding before us. Like that felt cool and surprising. And we saw it play out, of course, eventually in a different way because like Hush ultimately wasn't the story where Jason Todd returned, and it's ultimately a good thing that like it got to be its own thing. And the the moments of Hush exploring that part of the story get expanded upon in really interesting ways later on in how Jason Todd does return. But when you talk about like Hush stories specifically, that surprised me the most. It would be Heart of Hush.
What moment is your favorite in the Hush saga?
A broken record, like that moment where the moment and the things that unfold your after Hush takes Catwoman's heart, right? Because in Heart of Hush, just because it gives Hush a you're like you really see like, oh man, like he's done all this other manipulation stuff before, but this is just depraved. This sucks.
It's
Like
a
he
it's
really is
an
a bad SOB,
a turning point and an
to a
elevation
turning point.
of
Yeah.
villainy for the character.
Yeah. It's like a turning point moment that is on the level of a Joker killing Jason Todd or a Joker shooting Barbara
Yeah.
Gordon. Like I would
Yeah.
put, or Bane breaking Batman's back. I think I would put Hush, like if there's like a YouTube video or whatever, like most shocking Batman family turning points or things that
Yeah.
like F up Bruce Wayne as Batman. I think like Hush
That's
taking
one for
Catwoman's heart
sure.
is like it's up there. Yeah.
Nice. We were really close to doing a sweep of Ryan Brain,
Okay.
but I just before I settled on it, I have my Hush Absolute right here. And you
Mm.
probably saw as you were talking, I was listening, but I was doing a quick flip of like, I can only answer once. And millions of
Yeah.
people are going to hold me to my word here. And
Mm-hmm.
there is something as everything that you just said about the heart with Catwoman, totally agree.
Mm-hmm.
I always go back and reference the in the first Hush, um, Batman and Nightwing in the Batmobile and their conversation, and Batman saying like basically Dick speaks to
Mm.
him a way that nobody else does, and he's earned that right. I love that
I
moment.
love that. Yeah.
Doesn't really pertain much to Hush.
Yeah.
Okay, the heart part does, and then I got to like my first exposure to the Hush story at all was the opera chapter.
Mm.
And I really
Mm-hmm.
think that's my favorite Hush moment
Moment. Okay.
because the first time in reading it doesn't it doesn't hit like later on when I get the whole context of everything, but the issue, it's just so classic. The art is perfection. And opera house, this timeless classic feeling, an opera house and all that great Batman action and Catwoman and Harley. And then for a gunshot and for Bruce to come out and see Joker standing over, and it looks like he shot and killed his friend, Tommy Elliott. supposed to take Tommy
Mm-hmm.
Elliott off the suspect list and everything, and they'll be like, "Wait,
Yeah, yeah,
what's?
yeah.
Oh my gosh!" or
Oh, it
whatever.
was so obvious. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's and it's just to me, I don't know. That's just such a highlight chapter, and for the sake of having some kind of different answer than you, I
Sure.
think I'm going to mention that part.
That's a great moment. Yeah, because every and that's was the beautiful thing about following Hush as it came out was like every issue had like this shocking ending. It was
Yeah,
like like a good TV series where like you see the end, you're like, oh my God, like
yeah,
what? How are they going to get out of this? How are they going to resolve this? And of course, like the next issue after that was like, oh my God, Batman's going to kill Joker,
yeah,
and it was like he could kill him. Like,
yeah,
oh no, is
yeah.
Joker going to die in this issue? Yeah, it was awesome.
So I won't. Tomorrow I could be like, why did I answer that? I think it is the taking Catwoman's heart, blah, 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 whatever. But they're right there for the sake of being interesting and having a different answer. I'm going to go with the opera.
That's
Um,
great. That's great.
would you like to see any other Hush story adapted in animation?
Heart of Hush. Let's just say that again.
And I knew that that was
Yeah,
going to be my answer too. And I was like, no,
yeah.
I need something different, but it's so obvious.
Nah,
I did like the
it's so
first Hush
obvious.
movie. I did. I did like the first one.
I did. I
I
did.
have
Like yeah, go ahead.
I have issues with it. I have
Sure.
nitpicks
I do too. I
um
do too.
in what they did, but it did like it looked good and it was fun. I rewatched it last year and I'm like, this is a fun animated Batman movie. Um
It still gets a lot of things. I think it gets this might sound dumb, but like it gets more things right than it gets things wrong.
I
Like it
agree.
I mean,
Yeah.
obviously it makes changes, but
Hmm.
like the overall vibe and meaning of the story, like it does a
Yeah.
lot of things right. And it, the changes were for the better. Like I have said
Whoa.
time and again, well, I mean,
Whoa.
not that change.
Controversy
That
here.
change was not that change wasn't for the better. The main change was not what I would have decided, but like as a like one and done thing that would, and the fact that that Batman Hush animated adaptation was also part of this like larger DC animated narrative. Like they made it work with that, and
Yeah.
it was interesting to see like some of the modern characters like Batgirl and Damian like in sandwiched in that story, but it not feeling out of place was cool. And um, somewhat like Killer Croc changed with Bane. So and it just felt like they were able to kind of like still achieve some things. And ultimately, I've said time and again, like if I'm gonna see an adaptation of something, I it would be I would prefer it if it wasn't a one-to-one redo.
Yeah.
Like I'm seeing something in a different form, so let's make it
Yeah.
worth it.
Yeah.
If I want to read the story, I'll just read the story,
Yep.
So,
Yeah. And Heart of Hush for me just because it's a damn good story and I think they could very much
yeah.
do another. It could be tricky, but that's not the question for me. I think they could definitely do an animated movie called Heart of Hush. They just could, and I'd want it to be a
Yeah.
movie unless
Yeah.
it was an season, a multi-episode arc in Caped Crusader, which I don't know with the stealing the heart part that they could do, but
Yeah.
bringing Hush in Caped Crusader I think is very doable. I don't know how well they could adapt Heart of Hush in that area, but I
Right.
prefer a
I don't know
movie.
if that
Give
would
me
be
a
the
movie.
right. Yeah. Like a one and done movie. Yeah, I think they
Yep.
could do it that way. Yeah.
So our last words as we get ready to wrap up then, Haas.
Hmm.
The Hush, you could like your last words on the Hush saga itself, or
Hmm.
just like Hush as a character, like your final thoughts
Hmm.
before we go into the next chapter of Hush.
Yeah, I think Hush is definitely one of the marquee villains of the last 20 years, right? 25 years of Batman. I think the top two would be Bane and Hush. Like, in terms of, Bane, Hush, Court of Owls is not like that's an entity, right? I think that's up there, right? Um,
Yeah.
I wouldn't say shush. That doesn't count. Um,
So many people had opinions about that, and none of them read the story in which
I had the story.
the story itself is nowhere near as bad as that first announcement of the new villain
I know.
felt. You
The
know,
announcement overrides the
the
story.
yeah, the story itself was fine. Like even ask Pete, like, but too many people have
Yeah,
opinions and don't do the work. But anyways,
exactly. But yeah, like it's especially as far as like comic book convoluted continuity goes, I think Hush has had a pretty damn good run. Like you
yeah,
can't get much better than that original story. And as we've gone through this thing, right in the middle where when thing like right around like when things could kind of like tail off or get weird, really too weird or like muddled for a character like this, you have that like linchpin of Heart of Hush,
yeah,
like solid as a rock to kind of anchor and solidify that character's like
yep,
that is what elevated Hush from gimmick villain in crossover or in big event villain to like like Batman villain. So it's great that we have that. That's the thing that makes it a saga, right? And then you've got all these other stories that kind of prop things up and like keep things moving. Um, and I'm really hopeful that Hush 2 gives us that like either conclusion or like final stamp on the character that really does kind of bring this character like
yeah.
together in a big final statement on like that on Tommy Elliott, Hush, and how he relates to like Batman Bruce Wayne. So yeah, it's not many other characters I think you could obviously Joker or whatever, but like how many other Batman villains could have like a definitive omnibus worthy
Yeah.
storyline book, right? Like this. So I think this is fairly unique in the Batman pantheon.
Nice. Yeah. Try to think of something different to say than what you just said. But it's a character that's stuck around, and I think if it
Yeah.
sticks around, then that flat out just it means something. Whether you agree or
Hmm.
not, it's like apparently it resonated with the audience. And Hush definitely has. And we don't know if Elliot and Hush from The Batman in 2022 means something more come the Batman Part 2 or anything else in that world. So it's
That
and
is
then
that's huge.
Tommy Elliot in a much smaller scope. Tommy Elliot Hush showed up on Batwoman. Like and I think the character
Yeah.
of Hush showed
And
up
in
on
video
Gotham,
games,
right?
yeah. Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And
So he's reached the character has shown up in other bat related media. So he apparently struck a chord with fans. And then like you said too, of like to solidify that character, I think is Heart of Hush. And I think that's why the original story is very important, but I think Heart of Hush is almost just as crucial to keep the
yeah.
character part of the Batman mythos, you know? And
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
really am excited to see what the creators of the character have in store for us um in this next in the next chapter and then its final chapter. It's
Mm.
yeah, it's I think they if they could, DC would love to have a Hush every month situation, but they can't. You can't just force something into the mainstream and make it be a hit. You can't. You can try,
Yeah. Yeah,
but you
yeah, yeah.
can't. You don't
Hmm.
know why some things work, and they just do. I think Hush, like that's one that's got longevity, and so yeah, I'll stop rambling on
Yeah.
this. But I look forward to whatever this next part's going to be with Loeb Lee. So
Yeah.
there you
Absolutely.
go.
And then we can cover it right here on the Batman Book Club.
Yeah, on the Batman Book Club. Like, oh my gosh, it's so forgettable. The saga itself, you heard us, and I'll say it one more time. The original and Heart of Hush, I think, are mandatory reading,
Yep.
crucial reading. The others vary from fun to forgettable to okay.
Hmm.
So Hush and Heart of Hush, do it. And if you've read them many times, read them again. Doesn't hurt.
Yeah,
I had a good time.
yeah.
And I got to talk about it with Ryan Haas. And
Maybe
basically
you'll,
say the
yeah,
exact
maybe
same thing
you'll,
he said.
yeah, exactly. Like, and then maybe you'll get to kind of reevaluate just saying it's overrated. I think anybody that says things are overrated should be required to read said thing once a year to reevaluate their opinion. Because I've done
Well,
that before.
name will not be named, but you did have a conversation with someone who did think that it was overrated. It was a very good discussion to listen to.
Mm,
I enjoyed that discussion quite a bit. And I'm not going
when
to
was
tell
that?
someone, I'm not going to, well, one, it's just comics, so I'm not going to waste my time arguing about comic books with people.
Sure,
But if
sure,
somebody
sure,
doesn't
sure,
like Hush either, I'm not going to be like, how could you not like it? Now, The Long Halloween, I'd
sure.
say you are
That's
wrong.
different.
You are
It's like,
wrong.
what are you even? You're dead to me.
But I think some people can't think that things are overrated and such, but I think too, and I'm not accusing anybody of this, but if someone were to be dismissive of Hush, then I would question I would question their
Yeah,
stance because
yeah. There's a difference there.
I don't think you can dismiss Hush. Your opinion of it,
Yeah,
sure. But
yeah.
Haas, I've enjoyed talking the Hush saga with you.
Yeah,
We covered
I
a
wasn't
lot.
too sure what to. It was a lot, and when it seems like it seems like, and it is a daunting topic to kind of cover, but I feel
Yeah.
like this is enough of a primer to get people interested in reading more if they haven't.
Yeah.
And a few years ago, like that, I was like really excited because I'm like, oh, they're doing the Hush Omnibus, and then it kind of got like canceled for a while, and then they like
Oh
actually did
yeah, yeah,
come
yeah,
out with it.
yeah.
Yeah, they
And
made
then you
that
were like,
like,
oh, okay.
actually, never mind, let's do it.
Yep.
I was like, all
And then
right.
had Jim Lee do
Yeah.
a really awesome cover for it too.
Yeah,
It was a great
exactly.
cover. Um,
Yeah.
well, yeah, so thanks for setting some time aside and talking
Yeah.
with me here. Why don't you go ahead and
Yeah.
plug away anything and everything?
Yeah, like it's crazy. Like I've been actually on some podcasts lately.
Woo!
If you go to, the Batman on Film um podcast, like the main feed or whatever, I was on this latest episode of Batman Forever chapter by chapter, number and we talk about like the Robin scenes. Like Bill needed me on there to talk about
Broken
Robin because
wings, mend in
I'm
time.
Robin. One day Robin will fly again.
I can,
So
yep.
yeah, so I talk about that. And you
Excellent.
can follow me on the social medias at SMB_Ryan. Just find me at most of your various things, and I will probably be there.
And then you will also be back here, hopefully not too long from now. Of course, as Jeff Goldblum, sorry, Dr. Ian Malcolm said, life
Hmm.
finds a way. That sometimes life gets in the way. But as of now, we're very
Yeah.
hopeful that we're going to reunite not somewhat soonish to do some more Batman
Yeah.
talking. So there you go.
Oh yeah.
As for the Batman Book Club, follow on socials at the Batman BC for latest episode drops, upcoming episodes, and sometimes even some giveaways. Subscribe to the Batman Book Club on YouTube. Pete and I are going to No Man's Land this year. It's happening. It's definitely happening. And if you want to help the show, support the show in a variety of ways. Patreon.com/the Batman BC. tpublic.com, type in TBBC for the Batman Book Club. But if you want to help the show and you don't want to spend any money at all, it's 100% A-OK. Easiest, quickest, most impactful thing you can do to help this show right here so Haas and I can continue to talk to each other
Write a review.
is rate and review the show. That's right. So wherever you get your podcasts, go to the rate and review page and rate and review the show, because the more reviews the show gets, the more it helps spread the word. And as we all know, that word is panic.
Panic.
That was great. Well done. So for Ryan Haas, I am Ryan Lauer. And until next time, read my Batman comics.
Read my Batman comics.